Time for another Man in Gray book review. April is National Poetry Month, and so from time to time this month, I'm going to be making suggestions about possible poetry volumes you can read. If you're one of those people who want to read more poetry but are intimidated by the complexity and difficulty of modern poetry. So today's volume is Water, Water Poems by Billy Collins, published in 2024 by Random House. It's 144 pages. Billy Collins is one of the most popular contemporary American poets. He was the poet laureate of the United States for a few years. And a big part of Collins' popularity is the fact that his poetry is very accessible. You can read it and immediately understand what it's about. There's not complex or difficult. But he also writes about everyday events in his life, and he does so with a mild self-depreciation and slightly humorous irony. And so the poems are both understandable, but there's more depth to them than just like a kid's poetry book. So that has led him to become very popular, and certainly Billy Collins is one of those poets you should look into if you're interested in reading more contemporary poetry. Just a few days ago, Collins turned 84, and this volume is his most recent collection. And as at his advanced age, a lot of the poems in here are about aging and the possibility of death in the future, but they're done so in a rather lighthearted style. It's not a heavy, grim book. And so I'm going to read one of the poems from this, one of my favorite poems from this collection, and you kind of get a feel for Collins' poetry if you haven't ever read any of it. This particular poem is called Emily Dickinson in Space. Emily Dickinson in Space. When we were very young, we heard an Emily Dickinson poem being recited by our teacher. Then we looked around the classroom at each other. Later, I graduated to reading one of her poems every morning before I rose from my bed with the dawn. Once in a famous library, I was allowed to hold a letter she'd written. And when no one was looking, I shook it a little, the way it might have trembled in her hand. Then it began to tremble in mine. Another time, and this is harder to believe, before giving a talk about her at a university in Rome, I was introduced by an Italian astronaut who spoke not from the podium but from the orbiting space station, saying nice things about me. He floated on a big screen on a holiday from gravity. Behind him, an oval window was radiant with the sun's spotless light. Then he read one of Emily's poems from a slip of paper in his hand. There is a solitude of space, a solitude of sea, a solitude of death, finite infinity. And when he waved goodbye, I waved back like a schoolboy from the front row of the auditorium in Travis Terry near the flowing Tiber. Then I took up and gave my earthling talk. Afterwards, a woman told me that the astronaut was none other than Paolo Nespoli, who had spent an entire year in space and who was said to have been the final lover of the late Oriana Fallaci. Imagine that, I said to myself, looking up at the evening sky, her little poem still circling the globe at 17,000 miles an hour, hands down the fastest poem in history, if such records were kept, passing over everything below once every 93 minutes, including the Vatican and the Colosseum, not to mention the leafy canopy of Amherst, Massachusetts, and her small grave and headstone in the West Cemetery behind an iron fence just down an unpaved road. So that's Emily Dickinson in Space. That's a nice idea, by the way, to read an Emily Dickinson poem every morning. You might want to try that too during National Poetry Month. Pick a poet you like who writes short poetry. Just read one every morning when you get up. Put you in the mood for poetry. In any case, that gives you an idea of what Collins' poems are about and why they're so popular, why he's such a popular poet. The book is Water, Water Poems by Billy Collins. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.